Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Leslie Gant. I am the proud principal of the Joseph Tynan Elementary School, and we are thrilled to welcome Secretary Cardona, Mayor Janey, and of course, Superintendent Casselius and Chair Oliver Davila to join us for this roundtable conversation around how we reopen and what our greatest needs are and what that process has been like. I just want to share that I have been a lifelong resident of Boston. I've been here, as of July, it'll be 51 years. And I'm a product of Boston Public Schools. And when I went to college, I decided that I would not work anywhere other than Boston Public Schools. And so I have been in the district for 29 years. So I am definitely someone who takes everything that happens to heart, because this is my school district. And it means so much to me. So I'd like to turn it over to Secretary Cardona for some remarks, and then when he concludes, we'll all have a moment to introduce ourselves. Secretary Cardona.
Thank you, Principal Gant. I'm feeling great. This is my first visit to a school here in Massachusetts, and what a great example of what is possible when we put our heads together. And I know, having served as one before, the principal makes the difference too. They really put all the pieces together. Plans are only as good as the paper they're written on if it can't be implemented safely and done well with love and compassion like you've shown. The students here are amazing. The educators are amazing. And it's really about coming together and doing what's right for students. And I've been very clear from day one. My primary goal right now is ensuring that we safely reopen schools as quickly as possible, or at least allow for in-person learning. They've been open in different ways, but reopening them so that students could be in the classrooms like what we saw today, that is the best equity lever we can pull. There is no substitute for in-person learning. And you've shown you can do it, and it takes a team. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from the team on what's worked, what hasn't worked, because at the agency, we're going to do our job better if we're listening to what's happening, how we can really support you, and to make sure that all the efforts that we're providing are aimed at what the needs really are. So that's why I'm glad to see such a diverse group of folks that contribute to this family, right? To contribute to the school family. And we know that turning on the lights is not enough. Our kids, our families have experienced so much in this past 12 months. The trauma in the communities, families, whether losing jobs or being underemployed, or sadly many students are going to come back after having lost someone in their family. So let us not set the goal to reopen schools the way they were in March 2020. This is our moment. We have to hit the reset button on things that didn't work. We have to expect more of ourselves than what we ever did in the past. This president gets it. The American Rescue Plan is putting funds, unprecedented amount of funds, to provide the resources so that we could think big, we could think boldly. Our goal is not what it was March 2020, when we had gaps that were wide, where we didn't have sufficient social emotional supports for students before the pandemic. Now's our chance. Let's redesign our schools. This is the moment to be a principal, to be an educator, to be a superintendent, to be a mayor. But all of you too. We all play a part. We all play a part. That's why I'm really interested in hearing from the different perspectives. Ms. Carrasquillo, I'm sure your job changed just as much as mine did since last March. And some of the things that I'm most happy about in watching what's unfolding in this country is how we're giving attention to people that behind the scenes have been doing that work forever. Like you, Mr. Goss. You, Ms. Scott, like feeding children who didn't have food. So there's so much. Listen, I want to be here to listen. I could be thanking you all day. School nurses. And teachers and chairs and board members who really had to make sure that we're keeping students at the center of the conversation. So I'm hoping that when I leave here, I have some ideas that I can bring back to DC to say, this is what I heard. And I appreciate your time. This is an informal conversation. I know there are cameras, there's a formal. Listen, I want to hear what's working, what's not working, so that we can serve you better. And with that, I'm really excited to introduce Mayor Janey. Mayor Janey?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you really set the table today, so I will try to keep my remarks very, very brief. I'm grateful to you for making Boston your first stop, Secretary Cardona. Certainly to you, Principal Gant, for opening up your lovely school, Superintendent, our chair of our school committee, all of the amazing teachers and educators and support staff that are here today. I was born into an education family. I come from a family of educators. I know you understand that full well, having our school department named in honor of your dad, Principal Gant. And I spent the vast majority of my career in education policy and education advocacy. And what we saw here today is exactly why we do what we do and why I do what I do. These young people are students, so engaged in their learning, so excited to be in the classrooms with their teachers and with their friends. But you hit it on the head when you say that we have to do this safely and responsibly. Yeah. And that is the goal. As hard as our educators have been working with remote learning, we know that nothing can take the place of in-person learning. And so supporting the work here on the ground is exactly what we need to be focused on moving forward. And it is not about going back. It is about going better. It is understanding that we had challenges pre-pandemic that need to be addressed, and that this pandemic has only worsened things. But the good news, because there is good news, the good news is the dedication of our educators, the dedication of our school leaders, of all of those at central office who support this work, all of the support staff in our school buildings, and certainly our children and our families, and the work that they have been doing over the past year. And we know that it is going to be difficult, but I remain encouraged because of what we've seen here today and because of the outpouring of support of our broader community, and certainly President Biden and the American Rescue Plan and the resources that are coming to help us do this work. So I am just grateful and looking forward to a wonderful conversation, and I'm so appreciative of you coming. So thank you all.
Thank you. So glad to be here. So let's do quick intros. Tell me who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into the questions. Okay, we're going to start with you, Mr. Casselius.
You're fine, Myra.
My name is Mayra Casselius. I am the manager of the cafeteria downstairs. I've been here for 17 years.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Birdman?
I'm Chris Birdman. I am the STEM specialist here at Tynan, and this is my 20th year as a teacher in BPS.
Fantastic.
Thank you, all of you, for hosting us, and thank you for your visit. My name is Alexandra Oliver Davila, and I am the chair of the school committee. I'm also a BPS parent, and I also run a nonprofit called Sociedad Latina that we work closely with Boston Public Schools.
Brenda Casselius, Superintendent, and I want to thank you, Secretary Cardona, for choosing Boston to start out your Help is Here campaign and visits to schools, and also Principal Gant for our year team opening up the school. It just, on my 125 school visit, this school and the joy that was here and the sense of community just is so remarkable that I thought it would be a great place to start this tour for the Secretary, and I can't thank you enough. And I just want to mention really quick, Mr. Secretary, that our cafeteria staff is shy, but they have served nearly 5 million meals since we closed our doors seamlessly to our families, and that has been remarkable. And I just want to make sure that we recognize James Morton, who is from the state board, here as well.
That's great.
Hi everyone, I'm Leslie Gant. I'm the principal of Tynan Elementary, and you've heard enough from me, so we'll continue. Ms. Ruiz.
Ms. Ruiz?
Hello everyone, my name is Amanda Ruiz. I am the school operations coordinator here, and I am new to BPS. This is my first year, and I already feel like I'm a part of the family, so thank you.
That's great.
I'm Candace Surrey. I'm the school nurse. I'm new to BPS as well. I started when the pandemic shut down everything basically, so I'm starting fresh. I've been a nurse for about 6-7 years, and I'm primarily in the emergency room, but I'm happy to be at the Tynan.
My name is Kyle Goss. I'm a daytime senior here at the school, but here about almost 2 years now, assistant board 12.
Great, great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being a part of this and agreeing, to take some time out of your day to have conversations. As I said before, the goal for me for the next 20 minutes is really just to listen. To listen to what I can take back, what worked, what didn't work. First question I have is really directed toward the principal and the teacher. I'd like Mr. Berman for you to chime in after also. How have the reopening efforts gone? What would you say is what led to successful reopening?
I think here at Tynan, the biggest success we had is that we have a team, and so the people you see here around the table really made everything happen. So they are the behind-the-scene warriors who really consider what is it that our students need, how do we plan for everyone to come back safely. And so this group of people, as well as other staff members, have really considered how do we best meet the needs of our students, but all of us have the same mindset of putting kids first, and how do we get them back here. So, Chris, I think you can expound on that a little bit more.
Yeah, for us here, bringing the kids back was fine. It's a no-brainer. You know, we know how to run a school. We need to get the kids in the building. Once they're here, it's fine. We know what to do. The challenge was getting them back here. You know, how do we get more than one kid in the classroom? Because that doesn't feel right. You know, having 1, 2, 3 kids, it's not really a good base for teaching. You don't have the core of kids that you need to really run a lesson. So you have some kids here, some kids online, which is tremendously challenging. When all the kids were online, it was easier to deliver a quality education than when you have some online, some in person. As we get more kids back, that shifts.
Yeah.
The better education now is with the kids in the class, and the kids online, I think, suffer a little bit from it. The goal to get them all back here, which will happen shortly, I think that'll be this next big shift where we can focus on the kids that are here.
Yeah, you brought up, that's what I've heard throughout. Having them at home, it's easier to deliver, although you lose students over time. Having them here is obviously what the goal is. The middle part is the hardest part, right? Because you're trying to make sense of it. And I think once, what I've heard, you mentioned earlier too, getting them in at first is hard. I still remember that first day sending my children to school. I'm a father. Before anything else, I'm a father. When I dropped them off, that first day was the hardest. When my wife went to work for the first time, she works in 2 middle schools, that was the hardest. Make sure you have the mask. Is your door open? Is your door closed? But then over time, once you got that comfort level and you knew, the safeguards are in place, it accelerated the return and made everyone kind of feel comfortable. And you shared a little bit about the next question. I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit more on what he said. What were the challenges? So we know the balancing both online and in person is a challenge. What other challenge at the building level did you experience?
I think in the building, it was really around how do we ensure that we are providing that same quality that Chris talked about for the in-person students and for the students who are remote. And we really tried to be thoughtful around that. One of the things that we did was to have a mirrored schedule. So whether you were in person or remote, it's one schedule so that whether you're here cohort A, cohort B, or cohort C, you're still getting the same information at the same time. But I think for us at the time, because we're such a small school, getting the children back in the building was our biggest challenge because we had to convince families it was safe. Families that don't trust the system already, right? So getting them to understand that we have put plans and safeguards in place. And one of the great things that's happened is when kids started to come back, and so the kids who are home, they see the kids in school, and then I'm starting to get the phone calls, we want to come back, right? And so I'm really excited that we're reopening 5 days, April 26th.
That's great.
And we have 182 families of our 239 who have opted to return.
Good.
52 families have said No, we're gonna
Not ready,
remain
yeah.
remote, and we only have like 6 families that haven't answered yet.
Mm.
But we've really reached out.
If we have time on our stop, maybe we could knock on doors?
Well, we've been trying, and it was funny, I said to Mayor Janey, one of the big things that we did, because Dr. Casselius made sure that the district did that first push of information. But at the school level, you can't just depend on the district to take care of it, like, this is my school.
Right.
So then, we're sending out talking points information so that it's in the native language, so families can really get that information, ask questions. Then another round of communication, and then phone calls. And so I think they probably said, okay, Ms. Gant, yes, I hear you.
We're
We
in.
will give you an answer, but we're
Yeah.
thrilled that our kiddos are coming back, but of course it brings forth the
New-
spacing,
new set of
right? And so we're
challenges, yeah.
thinking that, but, you figure it out.
We're gonna get to that soon with the superintendent and a question about how to use the funds to handle that. But you talked about trust. And I always said, it's such an important, families trust their teacher, the principal, the school, right? And I know the culture and is such a big part of trust, it builds culture. And people that contribute to that culture of a school are always the cafeteria staff, they contribute to the culture of the school, and the custodian, the head custodian. How has it been challenging for both of you, and what have you done differently to help with reopening? We could start with Mr. Mr. Goss.
Well, with the team we have here, and a positive attitude, we make it happen. Francis as well, and the other members that are here at this moment, and Ms. Grant, Big Kitchen. Basically, that's about it. In my 19, we just make it happen. This is a small building, it shouldn't be dirty.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't be dirty. It's easy.
It's a beautiful building, you kept it up nicely. Yeah. How about you, how has your job changed, and what did you do to help with the reopening efforts?
Well, I've been working here, let's say, even with the kids wasn't here, but when the kids started coming back, we had to go ahead and started doing things a little bit different. But we got used to it. The kids got used to it. Basically, we kind of welcomed them most of the time. That's what we did. But we also work together here.
She works at the
So everybody helped everyone else.
Yeah, I heard a positive attitude and teamwork, right? And the kids feed off of that. They could tell, even with a mask, that you're smiling, right?
Oh, yeah.
They could tell, they know,
Yeah.
they know. Speaking of jobs that have changed, the school nurse job has changed in the last year.
Yes.
Not that I think we always celebrated the role of school nurses because they were such an instrumental part of our school's success. But now it's changed a lot. Tell us a little bit, how did your job change, and what do you think I need to know in order to make sure we're supporting school nurses?
Obviously, we're doing pool testing, so that's a big chunk of the time that it takes, like out of my day to do that, on top of the kids that have medical issues that I see on a daily basis. So it's kind of hard to be in a couple of different places at once. So I try to split myself up and be able to run around. Pool testing there's been pros and cons, I would say. I think it's a great idea because it's surveillance. We're not taking the place of children's primary cares, and we don't want the parents to assume that we are, like, I'm not a doctor, I'm a school nurse. But the surveillance has been very good. We've caught 2 positive cases, but it was able to be contained, that's what's supposed to happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? Instead of finding out a month later that, the whole first floor was infected. So that was good. But yeah, so pool testing has changed in general for school nursing. But I think the school's done a really good job with visual, like different posters and things for the kids to see. They're visual learners instead of just telling them, don't do this, don't do that, wash your hands. They're seeing pictures, they're seeing videos, everybody's kind of working together as a team, and I think we've done a pretty good job that way.
I think, you said something that really stood out to me. When you find a case, you treat it following the mitigation strategies that you're supposed to, and word gets out that they take it seriously and that there's not spread because those folks were quarantined and we found out about it right away and they acted on it. And that builds that trust to get more families in. I'm sure some of the families that are coming in are because they know when the cases come in, they're handled well. Yeah, and you're a big part of that. I'm going to shift over to the superintendent. So the American Rescue Plan has 130 billion going to schools across the country. We know that the intention here is really to make sure we build back better, right? How are you thinking about utilizing the federal funds? And, you know, could you also expound a little bit on some of the challenges you've seen across the district as schools try to reopen?
Yeah, so, thank you for the funds. So let me just say that. It's great to have the additional support and revenue. We've had incredible support from our former mayor and our current mayor, and our city council, of the Boston Public Schools during this crisis. And so we are in a different position than a lot of other school districts and cities that have faced layoffs, and have faced other, stresses on their operating budget. So we haven't had that because we've had the commitment from the city,
Great.
and our city council and our mayor. And so that has put us in a position to really look at these funds, to be able to invest them, to deal with the inequities. As you said, we don't want to go back to what we had in 2019. And so we know in 2019, we had deep inequities within this district from school to school to school. And this funding will present the opportunity to not only use the 20% that's required for recovery, but to build back better, stronger and more equitable schools across every neighborhood. Because parents want to have art and music. They want to have after-school, before-school programs for their children. They want to be able to have opportunities for rigor, but also intervention and acceleration. So we believe we'll be using this funding in 4 different ways. The first is to get money directly to schools and school leaders to make decisions with their equity roundtables that we instituted this past year. Maybe Leslie will tell you about how powerful that's been at her school. Because you have to have that equity lens at every single school and at the local level of the school, where parents make the decisions with the school leader and the teachers and educators at that building. The second is central office deployed supports that we think will create equity across the entire district. And so, you know, there are things like early childhood literacy.
Right.
We know for a fact that our early childhood students could not access remote learning like everyone else. And they're going to be behind at least 1.5 years, 2 years in their reading foundational skills. So we have to build back literacy. To ask school leaders to do that would not be equitable. So that will probably be something centrally that we deploy. The third is really supporting our full-service community schools, which we partner with our Y on, the YMCA on, and surround care and working with our partners in our communities, so the communities can invest in the schools. So those are really the 3 buckets: centrally deployed, school-based, and community-based investments to support our students during this recovery.
Okay.
We said we are returning strong, we're recovering, and we're reimagining a more equitable school district for our children.
You know, this is the hardest year to be a leader.
Oh.
It really was. You know, I shared that sentiment, trying to reopen schools in Connecticut, and just the variables changing all the time, and we want to balance safety and risk of not being in school for our students. But you mentioned you know, the role of community, so I'm glad to see Mr. Morton here. What a critical role you play as well. Mayor, I'd like to turn to you and then ask Chair Oliver Davila to respond after. What would you like us to know as an ed department on how to best support schools, coming from the municipal and then the chair of the board side? What should we know as an agency on how to best support schools?
Well, I think it all happens here at the local level, which is why I'm truly grateful that you have started here in Boston to see the amazing work that is already underway and what we will continue to build upon to make sure that we do come out of this stronger than ever before, certainly more equitable, and a much more vibrant city overall, and our schools play an important role. As everyone I hope knows, Boston is the birthplace of public education, and there is great work happening here. We cannot ignore the fact that this has been an incredibly difficult year, or the fact that there are pre-existing inequities that the superintendent just spoke to. And so it is important that we, as we come out of this, that our focus is not to go back to normal, not to go back to pre-March 2020, but to make sure that we stay laser-like focused on dealing with those inequities And sometimes those are hard decisions that have to be made. For me, I have found one thing that works well, and I know that is the focus of our folks here in our schools, and that's truly the partnership. I think of this table here with 4 legs, the importance of students having a voice and a seat at the table, our parents having a seat at the table, our teachers, and our administrators. If any one of those legs collapses, the table will fall. And so, it is important that we hear the voices of all 4 of those and that we create space at the decision-making table for those voices, particularly for our families, our students, and our parents who are directly impacted by the choices that we make. And I know that is the commitment here in our district, and I'm really proud of that.
It's powerful. Thank you. Thank you. Chair Donovan?
Yes. I would say a few things. I think the tour that you're doing right now, it is the listening piece, because each district is different, and each district has different needs, similar needs, but different strategies to get to those needs. And so I think is having just that back and forth, and similarly to like the ESSER funds, is like having more flexibility for districts to decide how to use that money, and obviously holding districts accountable for the family engagement piece. And I think I'll say one thing that I'd love to see is some kind of supports for the family engagement piece. It's been unprecedented family engagement, I think, because we've had to have our cameras on at home, and all of us have had to be involved in our children's education or grandchildren's education. I really would love to see how that continues, and so if there's some effort around that, because we cannot have, we need to take advantage to be different and to have our families be partners in this work. I think the other thing is, with the new administration, I'm very hopeful, because I think there were a lot of mixed messages before, and so it was really challenging. I sit on a weekly call with the Council of Great City Schools and all the board chairs across the large urban districts, and it's so much frustration for board chairs and superintendents to have, different messages. So I'd say, messages that are the same and clear and transparent. And I think having,
Based on science.
So, yes.
That's helpful. What I heard here is allowing for local input to be a part of the plan, and making sure that the fingerprints of those who are impacted by the decisions that we make are on the plans, right? And I know we need to make sure that those families that we have had a hard time reaching are also engaged, so that we just don't go back to what it was, right? Because we know that there's some families that we just, even before the pandemic, we struggled with. And making sure that when we reopen and rebuild our schools and reimagine our schools, they're engaging with those families. So you brought up family engagement being a part of that. Schools don't work in isolation from the community, so making sure that we're getting families involved, that's what I heard. Flexibility, accountability for engagement, right? So really powerful. I'm not sure how much time we have left. Rachel, we have 5 minutes? Okay, good. I have one question, and then for Mr. Birdman, and then I have a question for everyone, and we're going to try to get it done in 5 minutes, okay?
I'll talk quick.
No, that's fine. Listen, there was a TED Talk, and I wish I had the name of the person that did it. But based on what I'm going to describe, you can Google it for yourself, and I encourage you to do it. So it was about a tribe, I believe it was in Africa, where their greeting was a question that I'm going to ask you. All right? So you measure the success of a community based on how the children are doing. So the question is, how are the children?
The children are resilient. The children will follow the right path when led down the right path. And that's our job as educators, to be positive, to be optimistic, even as the world may not be right at this moment. We need to be right for the kids. And so our kids who are following us, they're good. Our kids are good.
Yeah, good. What is the young lady's name?
Tegan Rose.
Tegan.
Oh, I
So
thought-
she invited the mayor and myself to sit down, play with some Legos, and she even tried to get the chair out, those wiggly chairs.
Yeah?
She tried to get it out to have me sit down so she could explain what she was
She
doing.
put you right to work.
She put me to
Yeah,
work.
she
You know,
sure did.
there was some normalcy there.
Yeah?
And because of your support of the kids, because of the leadership, because of the everybody coming together, the partnership that you have, I feel like the kids are all right here. They're good. So thank you. Thank you. Last question that I have, and this is for everyone, but I'm going to start with you, Ms. Ruiz.
Sure.
How can the administration help further in your reopening efforts?
Well, I would like to start by saying that here at the Tynan, it has been emphasized already about the teamwork. And I would just like to elaborate on that a little bit because I know that we are expected to bring 100% every single day to this building. And I'm confident enough in our team to tell you that we bring 120% every day. And I know that I can lean on them, and I hope that they know that they can lean on me as well. So with that said, at the school level, we are doing fantastic because we work together. And I think that that is something that is understood within our staff here. However, in terms of the administration assisting the Tynan specifically, or, you know, BPS in general,
I'm thinking like what can Washington do? What can my education department do to support schools reopening across the country?
correct. I think it's very important to do what you're doing today, and that is listening to what we have to say, because we only know what's happening here at the school level, right? And I think that what you're doing today is already very helpful for us in terms of improving the conditions that we already have put in place as of today. So thank you.
Others, just jump right in nice and loud. We have about 3 minutes left, 2 minutes left. Share your final thoughts. What else would you like me to know before I leave?
I would like you to know and take back to work with whatever other department around out-of-school time, because schools can't do it alone. So I know there's lots of dollars coming to schools, and that's great. Of course, as chair, I want to see all those dollars, but also I think thinking about the out-of-school time field and the work that still, there's so much work, you know, our kids are good and they're not good. There's been so much suffering when we look at our Latino, Black, African American, immigrant, undocumented, and so there is a huge role for out-of-school time, partnerships in general.
Yeah.
Let me just build upon that, because I think that is a really important point. Our schools can't do it alone. We're thinking of just summer learning opportunities, and whether or not our students will be engaged in schools. How do we galvanize our nonprofit partners who are already supporting our schools, but are also hurting? So they need resources. How do we galvanize our cultural institutions in Boston, which are incredible and amazing, our higher ed institutions, our medical institutions? We've got the best in the world, but they too are hurting. And so I think the more that they can be included in terms of the resources so that they can wrap their arms around our schools and our young people and our families, I think the better off we will all be coming to the other side of this pandemic, a much more vibrant city.
I think continue to lift up the teachers there and all of the staff. They have had a year. They have had a year, and the empathy and the show of care and the appreciation, you're already doing it. I know you do it when you're out talking, just to continue to do that, and just telling them you know. I think also another thing that's really important is the children are good at the elementary level, but I think our high schoolers are struggling. I think it's been particularly hard on them, and being isolated and getting them back to normal is hard. One thing we could do is really push for those vaccines for our younger kids and get that as soon as possible. And for 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, if we really want to get kids back to school in the high school level and get them in summer jobs, I think we need the president and you to talk about vaccinating our young people where the vaccine is actually is ready for them.
My 16-year-old is pushing me already.
Yes.
Others?
I think it's important to consider the social emotional needs, right? And I agree with Mr. Birdman. The children you saw here today are good, but I know that I have some kids who are dealing with tremendous levels of trauma. And we try to do lots to support them, and Ms. Ruiz works very closely with our McKinney-Vento protected families. So these are our homeless families. And they have so many different types of needs, and it's not just the children, right? It's the families as a whole. And so we have to always keep in mind that social emotional learning piece is the foundation. Because if you're not in a space to learn, and if you don't feel safe, and if we're not acknowledging the trauma that has happened, then we're never going to see the recovery, right, of the learning that we know is within the student's ability.
Great. Any other closing thoughts? No, no is fine, if you feel comfortable. You know, I'll just close off because I'm getting the signal. I heard a lot. I saw good teamwork. I saw positive attitude. You know, this reminds me of that proverb, it takes a village, right? And we're seeing that. And then what I'm hearing is, as we move forward, let's expand that village to make sure that we're including our community partners, because it's a community. Schools don't live in isolation from the community. And I love your idea. You know, I had a conversation with the mayor yesterday about, it was a smaller community, but I said, every child in this community should have a free summer experience at a camp, at a YMCA, at a Boys and Girls Club. ARP can make that happen. That is your summer learning experience. Let's have a ditto-free summer. Can we commit to that? A ditto-free summer. Summer school, we don't need a ditto. Let's get the kids out there. So, but that's folding in our community partners who have also had such low membership in this last year and are struggling. Our little dance schools, our local mom and pop karate shop, that their business has suffered too. How do we, through an economic development plan or social development, community development plan, fold in the whole village to help our children?
That's it.
The American Rescue Plan is just the beginning of the funds, but how do we orchestrate that interagency work that you talked about, that I have to do with Javier Becerras in HHS, that I'll be doing with Marsha Fudge in housing? How do we do that everywhere so that at the end of the day, that young lady that told us to sit down and play with the Legos, she doesn't know who the secretary is and who the mayor is. We're just a team working together. So what I heard here gives me a lot of hope, a lot of promise that the funds are going to be used to really catapult Boston forward, where the village elders, right, are coming together for the children in a way that's going to sustain this, the recovery of the pandemic. And that gives me a lot of, that makes me feel confident that the students are going to, they're going to soar, they're going to grow. And I'm glad to hear they're doing well here, but we know we're coming out of a year of hurt, of pain, of trauma, and we're going to recover together. With strong leaders, good educators, and a committed family here, I know the students here are going to do well. So thank you so much for allowing me to walk the hallways, for taking some time out of your schedule, and more importantly, for what you do for kids daily. I'll leave last words to you.
So I just want to take a moment to thank you all for taking the time to come and visit our tiny little gym here in South Boston. We are always ready for anyone to come through, and I think I was speaking to Chairperson Oliver Davila when I said, I always say to my staff, teaching is not a private practice, right? It's an open door policy. I have an open door policy. My families know it. You're coming to see me, it's important. You don't need an appointment. You come, I make the time to see you. Teaching is not a private practice. You have to be ready, open the doors, and you're going to see what you see. We don't do smoke and mirrors here, right? We're not perfect, but we put forth, as Amanda said, 120% every day. And so our students and our staff, we all know it's children first. And every decision we make is children first. And if you can tell me how this works for a child, we find a way to do it. But if you can't tell me how this benefits kids, it doesn't need to happen. Not here, right? Not here. So, I appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are, and everyone here just coming to really focus on how do we make sure we're putting kids first as we reopen and reimagine schools.
How lucky are we that that's our job?
Yeah. I know, right?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mayor. Congratulations. So proud to meet you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.